Hi, this is Amy K. Watson. I am the CEO and head coach of Career Leadership Alignment, and it's the 4th of July, 2020. I can't think of anything more controversial than this date. It's a tough time to be human. It's a tough time to be an American. And I wanted to do something to address these challenges in a way that is thoughtful and helps to expand what we consider to even be possible. And in order to do that, I wanted to introduce you to my husband. This is Richard Smith. We have been married for 25 years, and my perspective certainly has been informed by his perspective, and I think a little bit vice versa. And Rick has an interest in history that incorporates a lot. I'll let him expound on exactly what he's been interested in, but I knew that he would have thoughts about being an American on this date that I would want for you to be able to hear. So here's my interview with Rick. So would you start out just by sharing with us kind of where you come from, what your family is like, what your hometown is like, and what interests you in history?
Okay. I'm from a very small town in downstate Illinois. Our county is up against the western border is the Mississippi River. For the longest time, it's mostly farming. But then, after a while, there were like factories or so forth in the nearest cities that, like Dad worked in one of those. But still, I mean, the joke is you go to Aledo to get to Aledo. It's not a place that you would necessarily go through going anywhere else. It's not way out of the way. It's not going to take, 6 days with a pack of mules to get to Aledo. But still, if you're not looking for it, it's easy. It's the epitome of flyover country in a lot of ways, and that way it doesn't change very much. So even little changes you can notice. Oh yeah, that's kind of, that's one of the things Mom and Dad used to do when I was growing up. We take a drive around the county, and they'd say, "Oh yeah, I remember when so and so lived there. Oh yeah, they tell you about Housetown."
Yeah, you do that all the time now. I always wondered where that came from.
Yeah. So, and my family, for whoever sees this, they're like me and they're not like me. All the things that you like is my family. All the things that you find boring and you don't care about, then that's me. But they're very effusive. I think you would call them effusive, and you don't want to say they're emotional, but they don't have any problem showing emotions.
They're expressive.
Yes, that's the word.
I've heard you describe the entire scene as just very Norman Rockwell.
Yeah. And my hometown too. The older I've gotten, the more I realize, oh man, I was so lucky. It was like me and all my friends, we were very lucky to grow up where we did, and so encapsulated. It's like, even people complaining and saying, I can't wait to get out of this town, didn't realize, that's exactly what, almost living stereotypes of small town America, Americana. When I was a kid, in 1976, I was 7. My older siblings, Johnny and Darren, they gave me a book on the American Revolution, a little picture book, the How and Why book of the American Revolution. I think I still have it somewhere. And because everybody's going sort of bicentennial crazy in 1976, and it was like everywhere, and it was on the news, I was like, oh, this is really interesting. So that kind of started it. And the way my family acts also, they talk about, the phrase would be, you're as Scotchy as Grandpa Brown, which is like my great-great-grandfather, so grandma's grandpa, who was notoriously tight with money. So if you were a little miserly with something, people might say you're as Scotchy as Grandpa Brown. So it's like, oh, there's something before here. There's something I came from. And so, I also belong to this country, and I belong to what's going on. And so I started reading history and learning about history and finding out about history.
and there's a lot of genealogy and um, ethnic heritage also wrapped up in your historical interests.
The latest branch of the family that I'm from, by the time they came to America as the Johnny-come-latelys, it was like 1908. That was the Swedes, which is like Dad's mom's family. Her mother or her grandmother was immigrated from Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I mean, the rest of it, there was, there was the McFerrins, who had immigrated to America in 1799, and there was the Welkers. I think he married a Welker, so they immigrated in 1737. And then, of course, there was the Libbies, who had immigrated from Maine to here, and they had come over to the colonies in 1647.
When did you first start to encounter Black folks in your world?
Like face to face or any representation?
Just give a synopsis that would give us the whole gist.
Oh, well, then it would be television.
Okay, so you saw Black people on television,
Right.
and you were young.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I can't remember the exact year. I think it was 78.
And then when did you start to meet folks face to face?
When I was going to college.
Okay.
So, 87.
And how many Black folks were you around at that time?
A growing demographic, because a lot of families would come to my... I went to college the next county over, so it was also very similar to the county I grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like downstate in this little liberal arts college, and it seemed idyllic and Americana, and so a lot of families, white families and Black families from the Chicago area and the suburbs, would want their kids to go here because it seemed safe and it seemed like, oh yeah, this is the place to go.
So maybe 10%?
Yeah, maybe 12 or 15.
Okay. What about other people of color?
We did have some international students.
And then what about in Alita when you were growing up?
Oh, no. It's like, yeah, who are people who were like different? Well, yeah, that would be the people who still had German spellings on their names, or the Irish kids. I mean, they weren't, of Irish descent, but yeah, there was. My joke about it is the demographics of Mercer County was the demographics of, the same demographics they had in the 1870s.
So as you look at your own growing up and how you have personally developed from your early childhood, from this really sheltered upbringing that you had, and just kind of getting slightly more worldly as you went to college, and then as you went to Europe, and then as you went to grad school, and then as we got married and started moving around a lot, and then settled here for now 20 years. And now with the most recent events happening in our world, how has your understanding of who you are and who these colorful people are around us, how has that evolved?
Well, at first it was theoretical, because like I said, I grew up in a bubble, found out, oh, there used to be such a thing as slavery. It's like, oh, well, now there isn't. Now it's like, oh, good. I guess like a lot of Americans would you be reading that, and it's like, and they talk about Reconstruction and they sort of gloss over it. Mm-hmm. We have a tendency, at least in my opinion, like, we don't talk about what happens in the South after the Civil War. We have a tendency, let's go look west. That's what we're doing in the West. And then we gloss that one over. It's like, let's not look too closely at how we got the West. Let's just look at all this other stuff. And then...
You just focus on the accomplishment.
Right. And the adventure and the character and so forth. And at least through the 1890s. And then we sort of focus back on East, but we don't... when the hell did we ever go back and focus on the South? But we didn't. I've been in college, and there were African-American students. I remember one in particular, LaShawn McNulty, talking, I think it was in a creative writing class. Our idea of like being afraid of night and black as a color is a depressing color, and it's a scary thing to have blackness around you in terms of imagery and so forth. And I had thought of it that way, but I was wrestling with that. I thought, well, hell, I'm scared of the dark. At least I'm arguing in my head. I'm not telling people I'm still scared of the dark when I'm like 20. Yeah, I had to think about that and to have any preconceptions, and having any idea that they would have a different life than I have. I had an idea they had an urban life, but just like everybody urban, nobody had. I did know by the time I was in college that the life I grew up in with the small town America was like not the majority of America. Like I realized, oh yeah, this gets held up a lot. But I knew from demographics when I learned in high school about homesteading and stuff like, well, yeah, everybody moved into the cities. Now we're mostly urban. And it's like, really? So like most people don't have my experience. When did I first learn about, the civil rights era? I was probably looking at the 50s. Because I remember talking to Mom about the 1950s because she would have been in her 20s. And she had this humongous collection of old Saturday Evening Posts that I used to leaf through as a kid. I just loved leafing through them and finding the cartoons. And then every so often I'd read a thing and say, wow, it seemed like an awesome time to be alive. And Mom said, no, it wasn't that. It wasn't what you thought it was. That was the first inkling I had of how we presented stuff is not the way things are. That's not even getting to the fact that, how life actually was. So I guess it would have been, as that progressed, I had some idea that's not the way it actually is. And maybe within the last 10 or 20 years at most is when I began thinking maybe there's something to how people of color, communities of color say America's acting and treating them, at least to put what I've been told about how things are all even and it's a meritocracy on a shelf going, I don't know if that's true anymore, in my own mind. It may, of course it would, if I'm going to put it on the shelf, I'm going to say maybe it was never true. But now it's like, I'm not saying yes and I'm not saying no. I'm willing to go, oh, there could be something to that.
How can I, as a white American, understand myself as anything or as something other than the villain of this story? And especially as we are coming up on July 4th. So yeah, so we've always had fun with the 4th of July.
Yeah.
We watch the movie 1776 every year on the 4th of July. We have watched John Adams. This year we're definitely putting Hamilton at the center of our celebrations. But as you think about this holiday in particular, how do you think about what it means to be American?
One of it is to actually know your history, how the way it actually is. It's tempting. I get it. Why some people love waving the flag. It's the same reason some people are very tuned into a brand and they always buy it and they're all part of a big group together and there's a lot of strength in the group and there's an identity in the group and it's like, but it's not really yours. It's not really yours unless you really know it. It just feels really good to be part of something big. It's more important to me. I mean, you're asking me what I think about it, to know who you really are, to come to grips with that. So when I struggle with, like, are we just the villains in this piece? It's not like, well, heck, I don't want that. Of course, you don't want to be. Nobody wants to be the villain. It's like, so how do I reconcile that? And that's the second thing when I think about being an American. I think about the nature of sacrifice. I think about the 2nd Rhode Island Light Infantry, which was a unit in the American Revolution. It was an all-black unit. I mean, it was still the 18th century, so they would have white officers, but it's an all-black unit, and I didn't know whether they're even free and emancipated after the war, or whether they have to go into Canada or someplace else. And I think about the 54th Massachusetts, which was in glory. And I think about other groups of people who are different from us, like the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, who were Japanese Americans. who were one of the most decorated units in Europe. And I think about the guys on Hero Street who were all, Latino soldiers who had served in the war from the Quad Cities. I think, I think about all these people served next to us and died next to us. So I think about that and I think I have to keep going. I can't just throw my hands up and say, well, hell, I wanted to be the white knight. No pun intended. For their sake, if nothing else. I can't let it be a lie.
Can you tell me more about what you mean by what would be letting it be a lie?
If we leave the story where it is, if we throw up our hands and say, I'm not going to engage in that, then the people who would benefit by letting it stay there means it makes a joke out of all those sacrifices. And if it makes a joke of those sacrifices, it makes a joke of our sacrifices. I can't let that be. So I have to keep on thinking about it, struggling with it, talking about it, until I can crystallize something, I don't know, in my mind about how I'm thinking or somebody asks me. Because, that's what I do. I think and I talk. So I do remember, this is my history. There was a relative of mine that served in the Revolution, and there's a line where Washington has written to Congress, and he's really tired of them not doing anything. And he's talking about the retreat from New York. And he's specifically talking about, I know this because I study history, about units that had been in the rear guard to hold up the English so they could escape. And he says, my God, what brave men this day must lose. I think we were there. My ancestor was there. So, I tie it to that, but then not any less so than all the others that had been there. And all the others that had served for their country or served for their freedom. I can't let it go. History is present to me, in front of me. So, I guess that's what that means.
So I do have hopes that this video will be viewed by people who know you and love you and who can relate to you as 50-year-old white guys who want to be proud of being an American, but have been trying to figure out what that means. And I know that there are a lot of folks who can relate to us, who have good hearts and are hurting with the weight of coming to terms with everything. Who maybe are wanting to be redeemed but don't know what the path forward is. What would you like to say to them?
Yeah, I think, if you've really been struggling about that, and you want to do what the right thing is, it's like, well, maybe it would be helpful. Instead of thinking this is a come to Jesus moment. It's all or nothing. I don't think it works like that. I think it's sort of more like at the very least, you could put what you believe on some shelf and have some skepticism about what you've been taught. Doesn't mean you reject it. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. But, I mean, to put it in terms we would understand, like working class Americans, it's like, well, yeah, and the government's never lied to us. The government's never screwed us over. And if we can joke about it, know that, yeah, sometimes we feel like we got the short end of the stick. It's also possible other people have gotten an even shorter end of the stick. People that we had more in common with than we ever knew. And it's worth thinking about. Because what it means to be American is you're going to keep struggling. I mean, it's an experiment. So you don't just say, oh, yeah, experiment's over. I think it just keeps running. And I think it only fails if we stop. It only fails if we give up. And that way it's more like a family. It's like, as long as you're still working at it and you know where you're coming from and you're willing to listen to the other members of the family, then well, I believe in people, so I believe you're kind of come to some kind of understanding. At least that's what I believe.
So are you saying we can be proud of the fact that we're still in this? We're still trying. We're still listening. We're still experimenting. We're still trying to find the way forward together. And as long as we are doing that, we are doing something remarkable.
Yeah. Yeah, actually I do. Yeah. Like I said, the history is present to me. And there was a quote from Ken Burns' The Civil War. I can't remember her name, the African-American historian who was talking about it. And she basically made the point that it's still possible for us to lose the Civil War.
Mm.
And it's like, that didn't make as much sense when I first heard it as it does now. It's like, no, now I get it. And it's like, oh, because we only lose Reconstruction if we don't learn about it. We only lose it if we let the things keep on going on the way that they have. And we also suffered and died for it. And if anybody says, no, it wasn't about slavery, it was about union or it was about states' rights, it's all BS. We're a capitalist country. There was money to be made doing this. We found all ways to tell ourselves that, well, we have to do this because it's important, but basically it came down to money. And we finally stood up and said, I don't care, it is money. I don't care if it tears us apart. We can't have this. So we fought and died. Whether we would even acknowledge it, whoever we were at the time, that that's what we're dying for, that's what we were dying for. It's like, yeah, I'm not willing to let that be a loss. And it's only a loss if we stop fighting. So that's why we have to keep fighting.
Thank you so much for talking with me this afternoon. We have these conversations all the time. Easy to do with somebody like this. Yeah, this has been really helpful for me. I love that idea of being proud of the fact that we are learning our way through it. And that's one of the things that I work with my clients on all of the time, because we're always coming into situations where we don't know how to handle it. And all we can do is experiment and learn our way through it, and hopefully in partnership with other good people. Thank you for watching, and if you're just watching a clip, please, I invite you to go back and watch the entire video so that you can get to know this remarkable person here even better, and hear the context behind the clip that you heard. But if you were with us through the whole thing, I thank you so much, and I hope you have a great day.